Okay, so we're back, and we'll take a look at our next task, 14.3, for extension mobility. We're told to provision Eloise, the user, with the ability to travel to either the corporate headquarters or branch 2 sites. She's a branch 1 user. And while there, log in to the phone 2 at either of these sites to ensure that while Eloise is visiting either the corporate headquarters or branch 2 sites, that all of the following work properly. To ensure that Eloise retains her class of restriction and that calls show up as coming in from 2001 and Eloise Hawking, respectively. To ensure that the phone Eloise is logged into reflects the proper date and time. To ensure that VoIP calls to any other site other than the one that she's currently visiting use the G729 codec. To ensure that multicast music on hold streams properly to her phone. Ensure that if the branch 2 site were to lose WAN connectivity, the phone she's logged into at whatever site would fall back to that respective, in this case branch 2, to the branch 2 SRST router, but either one, mainly because corporate headquarters doesn't have an SRST router. Site for the main CUCM, so if both of them go down, well then, ensure that, Eloise dialing habits, however, must adjust to the site that she is local to. For example, to get secondary dial tone and an outside line, she has to dial 9 while at the 2 US sites, corporate headquarters and branch 1, but 0 when she's at the Netherlands branch 2 site. To dial nationally, she has to dial 1 while at either of the 2 US or 0 at the branch 2, and internationally 011 from US and 00 from branch 2. AAR must function properly while she's logged into any of these sites. Ensure that calls made to her display would show exactly as they would as if she was back at, actually she'd be at the branch 1 site, so that's a typo. We're told on further that since Eloise will be the only person traveling to these 2 sites and logging into these 2 remote phones, we're told to configure a way so that any phone she goes to log into, she only has to press 1 button on the phone to log in. Ensure that she has the ability to log out of any phone without any assistance, and that when she does, that the phone she was logged into goes back to operations just as if she had never been there. Also to ensure that when she returns home to her branch 1, she's able to log into that phone if someone else had logged in. So if Eloise forgets to log out of a phone that she visits, we should automatically log her out after 10 hours. Allow Eloise to log into multiple phones. However, if she logs into a phone while still being logged into another phone, ensure that she's automatically logged out of the previously logged in phone. And, well, when she logs out of a phone, automatically clear all of the call history records. Okay, so first let's just break down the main differences between device mobility and extension mobility. The first glaringly obvious difference is that for device mobility, you take your physical phone with you, be it a BlackBerry or Nokia or 7921 wireless or what have you, or maybe even a desk phone. With extension mobility, you take nothing with you but your username and password, and you log in to a service on another phone, and that phone becomes your phone. So first of all, there has to be a phone for you to log into that's vacant. And then you don't have to carry any hardware with you. Main difference, though, being most of these things sound fairly similar. Some of these are specific to the service, but most of these sound similar. Class of restriction still applies, and for both device mobility and extension mobility, class of restriction will apply if, like we talked about in Module 9, line device approach is used for calling search spaces and partitions. If it is, then class of restriction will follow. Calls coming from her number and name or Jack's number and name for device mobility, all that has to do with the actual line, and that follows you whether it's line device or traditional CSS, whether it's device mobility or extension mobility, so that's always going to be there. Proper date and time, as long as extension mobility is logging into a phone at that site that was set up properly, then that will always work. And with device mobility, the same thing. G729 between other sites, that's the same at both. Media, resources are the same at both. SRST references, those are the same with both device mobility and extension. The big two are, one, do you take your device or do you just take a username and PIN? And two, what are, and this is the big one, the dialing habits. So with device mobility, you retain your dialing habits always, unless we choose to kind of manipulate the system in a different or not by design, not by intent by Cisco fashion, and only create one DMG, even if we have multiple countries. But with extension mobility, we don't really have a choice. And that's because we're taking the calling search space of the device that we log into. The only thing we take with us is the line, our own line CSS to maintain our class of restriction. So this works for emergency services. In fact, emergency services even between countries would never be routed back to our home gateway. But then again, 911 won't work when we're at the branch 2 Netherlands gateway. We'd have to dial 112. So our dialing habits must change with extension mobility. All right, so let's set this up. So we've got our, go to user management end user, login, find Eloise Hawking. Note that we never had any user for Jack Shepherd for device mobility to work in its entirety. Eloise Hawking, let's just be sure that the password is Cisco. Actually, we're not going to need the password at all. But the PIN, importantly, just key it back in as 12345, just to be sure. She already has a controlled device, or her Brava Alpha Echo device. She doesn't have, for extension mobility, any profiles yet, but she will. Notice one thing that we haven't covered yet is any of the presence topics. We'll certainly cover that in a deep dive, and we'll come back to device users, extension mobility with that presence, but that is presence as it's specific to extension mobility. So when you're logged in with a user device profile at another device. Okay. Notice the mobility information. This is not device mobility or extension mobility. This is unified mobility. It should say unified mobility information. But we don't need to enable mobility for device. We didn't because we never had a user for Jack's phone. We don't need to enable it for extension mobility. This is just unified. Okay. So the first thing we need to do is go set up a device profile. And these used to be called, in the database they still are, a UDP rather than the ambiguous DP, which could be device pool or device profile. This is a UDP, or a user device profile, that is separate from an ADP, which is an auto-generated device profile. We'll see where that comes into play in a moment. So all of our phones are 7961s. And is it skinny or SIP? Well, her phone is actually a skinny phone. Take a look at that in a bit. So, you know, we could leave these because we've got our device pool, or the device pool actually of whatever visiting device, but let's just go ahead, or maybe we have them configured on the line. Let's just go ahead and take the user hold audio source, phone button template is module 3 enhanced skinny. One that we had previously been using. In fact, it might not be a bad idea just to open her phone specifically in a new tab. So branch 1, phone 1. Echo phone. And really, I need to try to, but window. Skinny. Her skinny. Yep, her phone was skinny. We'll call it UDP to avoid ambiguity for Eloise Hawking. Audio source, English US as a locale. Let's just make sure that her phone button template was Module 3 Enhanced 7961 Scan. Good. Soft key template was Module 3 Enhanced User. Good. Privacy, what was she set to? It was off. All right. We'll confirm banner. Single button barge and join across lines. I think those were just left to default. Yep. Ignore presentation indicators. I know she didn't have that on. DND option and incoming calling alert. And login user ID is going to be eHawking. Okay, add successful, and now we need to create her shared line. She used 2001. Partition, or internal DNs partition. Once we do this, we'll see a saved line. We'll see an existing device and her user profile. So we'll go over to the existing device because we want to get these line 1 on her existing device parameters so we don't have to key them in again. Edit line appearance. We'll scroll down and we'll update the shared device settings. Propagate selected. Worked. So now we'll go back to UDP Eloise Hawking. Edit the line appearance. We've still got her calling search space, which is unrestricted, her AAR pattern, and now we've got her name and line text label and external phone number mask. We go back to her device, and like we're done, we'll go, and here's her user device profile. Okay, so we've got this. Now let's go to back to her end user, and we see it as an available profile. We're going to drop it down to controlled profile and choose it as her default profile. Press save. So now we've set up her user device profile. We still need to set up the service for her to be able to log into. So let's go out to cisco.com. Let's just cisco.com. And we'll click on support. Click on voice and unified communications. IP telephony, call control. Scroll down to CUCM. And we're going to go to maintain and operate guides. And really we can go to just about any version, but we'll choose 7.0. Features and services guide is what we want. And we're going to want extension mobility here. And we can either look over here on the right, or what I typically do, here we go, adding the Cisco Extension Mobility Service. I typically just do a search for http://. Here we go, adding the service. We've got our URL for the new phone service that we need to create. So we'll go to device settings, and phone services. See a number of services already. We're going to add a new one, and we're going to call it extension mobility. URL in. Place it with the IP address of, let's say, the publisher for right now. We do a host name with round robin HTTP port 80 service record lookups if we wanted to have that load balanced, or maybe a content series switch. Now there's a couple things. One, is it an XML service or a Java midlet? It is an XML service, and it's a standard IP phone service. It's not a directory or a type of messages. Also, we're going to want to enable it, but we're not going to want to press enterprise subscription unless we're sure that we want everyone in the entire cluster to get this service, and it's one that they cannot remove. They won't see that as an available subscribe or one to delete. and it's not one that after we press save up here, we can come back into it and we can edit all of the parameters except enterprise subscription. So we can't essentially unsubscribe it from everyone. Once you've done it, and this goes away. You don't see it anymore. You don't see it under the individual users, but it is there. You do when you actually press services on their phone, but not at their device, phone, and then up at the top right, subscribe or unsubscribe services. You don't see it to subscribe or unsubscribe. It's automatically there. And it's for that reason that we can't do anything very specific. We can't add parameters to it either, because parameters would really only be specific to one user. And what we're going to want to do is add parameters for, if you take a look back at our task, we were told that since Eloise will be the only person traveling these sites and logging in, we should configure ways so that when she goes to log in, she only has to press one button on the phone to log in. This is called Extension Mobility One Button Login. And we've also got one button login for IP phone agent with the UCCX system, but we're only looking at mobility today. You'll see that we'll create the UCCX IP phone agent service for one button login in pretty much exactly the same fashion that we're going to do this. Now, we could go back in the real lab and click on, let's see, clicked on maintain and operate guides. We could have clicked on configuration tech notes for either maintain and operate, or I think configuration example tech notes would be what we would want actually. And we'd click find, Control F, and hit button. There's one button login for IP phone agents. I actually don't see one button login for extension mobility, so let's go back. Maybe it is under maintain and operate tech notes. Okay, so maybe it's not even here for words phone. Okay, well, I don't even see one button login for extension mobility, but that's okay because we really don't have to have it. In the same manner that we can get all the information for IP phone agent, we can get it for extension mobility. So we would grab the URL that we were going to create, and we're actually going to go ahead and create this. We're just not going to do enterprise subscription. And we're going to grab the URL. We're going to open a new window, although it does have to be Internet Explorer. Not a problem for you in the lab, and not even a problem for me here. Let me just open the window. Bring it over, and we're going to paste in the URL, but we're going to replace the variable for pound device name. Notice that this is a our path or our URI has a question mark and then more information. So what we're doing is we're passing a variable on to this CUCM app servlet here. This Tomcat service is what it really is. And we're passing the value for that variable as actually sort of another variable, which is get the information from the phone that's doing the request, the HTTP request. So what we can do is manually replace this, or I can't actually, okay. Go. All right, so if I were to go over to phone and grab her SEP MAC address, that is her phone device name, right? Device name. So I would replace hash, device name hash, operate with me, and it's not really one. To replace it with her MAC address, actually SCP MAC address, her phone device name, and what we get back is the XML that would be displayed to the IP phone. We get the prompt, please sign on, the URL that's going to be triggered, which is actually the exact same URL, and there are two parameters or query string params that we need to pass on that she would fill in the information for. User ID is alphanumeric, and SEQ is your display name PIN number with N and P. N is number and P is a password. Anyhow, let's go back over here to where we're creating our service. Back to find lists, click on extension mobility just in case it doesn't update properly. Grab new parameter, and the parameter name, there's the display name and then the name. Okay, these follow the fields we see here. The display name is going to be user ID as well if we want. We have to put a descriptor in. Parameter is required. That, and then query string param, that's the actual parameter name. That has to be case sensitive, properly copy and paste would be best. These two really don't matter what they are. The value is what we want everyone to have. Now we can fill this in on an individual case-by-case basis, or since she's the only user, we can just go ahead and have the default value of her user ID right here. Save and close, and user ID has been updated. We'll add a new parameter, and the new parameter display name will be PIN. Actual param name is SEQ, sequence maybe. Default value 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, and then numeric and P, it's a password, so mask the contents. We'll save that. We'll save the whole thing. Oops. Go. And we've now got this information in for one button login. Okay, so again, we found that out just by going to the web page for it. And we could actually even pass this information on from the web page. So, and by the way, this doesn't have to be her device. This would really be the device that she wants to log into. So like here you can see that I've had Foxtrot 1 Delta Echo, which is another, and what we can do is put in ampersand in between each of the parameters equals the value, ampersand next parameter equals the value. So after question device equals the value, it would be ampersand, user ID equals eHawking, ampersand SEQ equals 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And this would be the device that we want to log into. Because we had all that information, we had the user ID and PIN and the device name, it would actually log us into that device, assuming it was set up properly, right here from the web browser. Okay. Go ahead and close Internet Explorer. All right, so now we need to go associate phones with this IP phone service. So we need phone 2 at each site is what we were told to do. Describe them to extension mobility with all the parameters already keyed in so that one button will work. You don't have to restart a phone because when they actually press services, it will, it actually goes out and restarts it anyhow, but when they press services, it does a live HTTP call to that page and would already find that there. Whoops. And while I was in corporate headquarter phone 2, I wanted to also, but forgot, go down and actually enable the ability to log in to Extension Mobility. So we'd log into Extension Mobility, give it the ability to log in, start the phone again, branch 2, phone 2, the ability to enable Extension Mobility, the logout profile. Now we can assign a specific logout profile, but the reason we don't see any in here is because the only user device profile that we've already created, we've already assigned to the user of eHawking. But if we had others, we could have a logout profile. Maybe we'd have a common logout profile for all phones. But use current device settings means that when Extension Mobility goes to log out, when Eloise logs out to go home, it will actually log in using Extension Mobility. The phone will automatically log out and go to a user device profile. It's actually going to be an use current device settings is what creates the ADP, or the auto-generated device profile, which we don't see anywhere in here. It shows up in the database, and it's basically a mirror image of everything that we already have here. Okay, but it is still using device profiles and Extension Mobility. So we need to subscribe to a service. Save. Set, restart. And then also branch 1, phone 1. We were told that we needed to allow Extension Mobility to work for her phone as well. So maybe people will be logging into her phone. Give her the ability to log in and out of her own home phone. Okay, so we've got Extension Mobility enabled for her phone and the 2 other headquarter and branch 2 site phones. We've got her user device profile created and linked to her user. Now, here's a problem. Go back and look at the tasks. We were told to ensure that Eloise has the ability to log out of any phone without any assistance. And that when she does, the phone she was logged into goes back into normal operations. Well, actually, let's just not do anything with that for the moment, and let's just go ahead and test what we have and see what happens. All right? So we're going to actually bring up another remote phone, or phone remote instance. And we'll bring in 3002. And so James Ford phone, we're going to go ahead and press services. And because there's only one service there, Extension Mobility automatically logged in and said, login successful, resetting, please wait. Now, had there been multiple services, it would have asked us which service we wanted. Because there's only one, it went ahead and automatically logged in. Logged in because we already had the user ID and PIN, or the credentials, set in the parameters. That was the one button login. Now she's registered as Eloise Hawking. If we go off hook, it's going to show that we're off hook on her phone as well. This doesn't have refresh set on it, but if I click refresh, phone, or it goes to busy. Okay, let's go device 1, control, with refresh. Oh, now we have the user device profile as well. I see, that was why. Okay, so if we go off hook on the logged in phone, James' phone, notice that her phone will show here in just a moment. There we go. The non-idle on the actual phone, it's showing red lines. So if we do 911, we immediately, after I dial 9, get reorder tone. And the reason is that she's at branch 2. She can't dial 9 anything. 1001 was dialing out local. Let's clear that buffer. Our other 2 buffers are cleared. So let's see if she can dial from her own home phone 911. That's from her home branch 1 phone. Okay, and she can dial just fine. Shows that she's on off hook and 911. So she actually is, this is just operating just like a shared line. Remote logged in phone. So let's clear this buffer. So she's over at branch 2 and she wants emergency services. Go off hook here. Up, and we'll dial 112 for emergency services, and then we'll go out the branch 2 gateway. Okay? So dialing will work. Let's have her dial nationally. 0, 0, 1, 0, 704, 7444. Okay, so now she's dialing out nationally out of branch 2. What if she calls back to 3001? Okay, she goes off hook. We mute it. And look at her stats, and she is calling 177.3.11 is her local IP to 177.3.11. She's 52, he's 56. They're using G722 because they're on the same subnet. She called to 3001. 2001, but she's logged in at a 3002 phone, or a phone that's physically at branch 2. What about to 1001, which is now back registered proper at its corporate headquarters site and subnet. Device mobility is still on. Fresh here. She's 177.3.11 to 177.1.11.33. We've got G729 talking to, of course, Jack Shepard. Okay. So what about music on hold? Actually redial that call. He'll answer. He'll put her on hold. She's hearing music on hold. Let's look at the stats for the stream. Refresh it. She's getting 239.111, G711. The receive codec. The transmit is just the last. There's no packets. So she is 239.111 is the multicast music on hold for G711. 722, but the music on hold server doesn't speak G722. That call. Okay. That looks like it's working properly. So now she wants to log out. She presses services, and it says no services configured. No services configured? What do you mean? Branch 2, phone 2. Subscribe, unsubscribe services. Got intercom calls, which doesn't show up, but it's got extension mobility. It had to. How else did we log in? Oh, wait a minute. We logged into the phone, and now we're logged in with our user device profile. So let's go on to her user device profile and see what services she has subscribed. She has none. Now we could give her extension mobility. The problem is that extension mobility service, oops, I went to device services. Extension mobility already has two parameters that we gave default values. So, and even if we hadn't given them default values, the fact that we gave them parameters and said the parameter was required, that means that when we actually subscribe a user, or actually a device or user device profile to the service, we have to fill in that parameter with a value. So since we had to fill in those variable parameters with values, extension mobility will try to basically log her back in. So this, we're going to call this extension mobility Eloise Hawking, because that's really, well, let's call it E-Hawking, because that's really what this is this is just extension mobility just for Eloise Hawking. Or technically, when you subscribe to user, they could fill in their own, or the administrator could overwrite whatever the default value was. But we don't have anyone else, so this is going to be extension mobility for E-Hawking. Because of this, we actually have to create a new service that we're going to call just extension mobility. Maybe we'll call it extension mobility logout. Could actually be log out or log back in. Enable it, but we're not going to give this one any parameters. We are going to go to her user device profile, subscribe her user device profile, not to extension mobility E-Hawking, but to the logout. Subscribe it. Now she's subscribed, but wait a minute, where's a reset? There is no reset or restart. Okay, so how is she going to get out? Well, we're actually going to have to, and I went to the wrong phone here, we're going to need to go into the phone, so branch 2 phone 2 is the one she's currently logged into. Actually, when I'm up here at, could actually go to actively logged in device report, find that there is one device that has a logged in profile, E-Hawking 2001. So did everyone see where I was? I was at phone, device phone, and instead of just clicking find, which I already had devices or records populated from a previous find, I went up to actively logged in device report, click go, and there I see that the UDP Eloise Hawking for user ID E-Hawking directory number 2001 is logged into this device. I can scroll down to extension mobility here. I can log her out. I can view user device configuration, how it looks on her phone as it's logged in through extension mobility, or I can log her out. So this was the administrative assistance to log her out, where if we go back to the phone, it's restarting because she logged out, even though it was through administrative help. While that's restarting, if we take a look, ensure that Eloise has the ability to log out of a phone without any assistance. That was the assistance. So we need to, and we already did give her subscription to the user to the service of extension mobility logout. That restarts. Here it is. Page. And now James Ford is back. So now we can press services. Still has the service. He doesn't have extension mobility log out. He only has extension mobility, which is we renamed to extension mobility E-Hawking, the one button login. So it's still one button, to log in. She is the only user device profile, or device for that matter, on the system that has two services, one extension mobility e-hawking and the other extension mobility logout. Now she's logged in as Eloise Hawking. She can click services. Ask, do we want to log out e-hawking? Yes. Now it's restarting again. Logout was successful. It's going to restart as James's phone. So now she actually does have the ability to log out without any. Okay. If Eloise forgets to log out of a phone that she visits, automatically log her out after 10 hours. Well, we haven't seen anything related to that yet. Let's go back to CUCM. And there's really no space in here for extension mobility. There was device profile, user device profile. There's extension mobility specifics under each phone. We created the extension mobility service or services. There is a service parameter section dedicated just to extension mobility. Under this extension mobility, we've got some information such as, is there a maximum login time? Well, by default, it's no. We're going to change it to yes and change the maximum time from 8 hours to 10 hours because that's what we were instructed to do. Eloise forgets to log out, automatically log her out after 10 hours. Also, if Eloise logs into multiple phones, allow her to. However, if she does, while still being logged into another phone, ensure that she's automatically logged out of the previous phone. Okay? Multiple login behavior. By default, multiple logins are not allowed. We can change it to just multiple logins are allowed, or basically auto logout, which basically says, we can click this link for context-sensitive help to tell us exactly. Logins allowed. Here we go, auto logout if a user ID is logged in to extension mobility on one device and the same user ID attempts to log in to extension mobility on a different device, the first device automatically logs out. So it does allow multiple logins. This right here, you would simply meet with, in fact, let's actually just try it. Have her log in to extension mobility on James's phone. Switch this phone control over to 1002, headquarter phone that she's going to be logging into. Device is possibly not a phone, huh? Work like a phone and control the phone? Okay, then I'd say it's a phone. Again. Okay, over at 3002, or the phone that was 3002, the hardware device, at branch 2, Eloise Hawking is logged in. However, Hugo also wants to log in, so he presses services, and login unsuccessful, user logged in elsewhere, the error code 25. Okay, so that's what you get by default with multiple logins not allowed. Multiple logins allowed, he would be able to log in and the branch 2 phone 2 would stay logged in. Auto log out, which is what we're going to switch it to, will automatically log out branch 2 phone 2 once we do that. Then we were also told when she logs out of a phone, automatically clear the call history records. So here's the clear call log. For privacy concerns, we'll go ahead and press save. There's also some advanced parameters. We can validate IP addresses, a trusted list of IPs, or extension mobility cached. Remember the last user that logged in. Doesn't remember their password, but it remembers their user ID, and then they have to put in their PIN. Password. I should have said PIN. keep those in mind. There is advanced parameters. So now, and I don't remember if we have to restart CUCM for this or not. Eloise is still logged in at branch 2 phone 2. Try to log her in at Hurley's phone, and it's going to say login successful. Resetting. Please wait. So apparently we do not have to reset the CCM service. Automatically logged her out of branch 2 phone 2, and it's restarting that phone. Back to control. I'll just update this. Oh, it actually looks like it did update properly. That's James Ford. Plugged back in as his own phone. We'll go ahead and shut it down because we're done with that one. This corporate headquarter phone 2 is now Eloise Hawking. So if we were to dial out of this phone, 911 for instance, it's going to go out the corporate headquarter gateway. If we dialed, let's say, maybe 9011 312070370333 hash. Again, it's going to go out the corporate headquarter gateway as an international call. So everything works in the same way that we were instructed. She basically has to take on the dialing characteristics of whatever site she's at. Calls go out the local gateway. Fine. We've configured one button login. It's able to log out herself. Press services and log out. Again, we didn't do anything to corporate headquarter phone 2 other than the initial subscription to Extension Mobility. This is because her user device profile has the Extension Mobility Logout app. Keep in mind, there's nothing unique about the Logout app. It's also a login app. It just so happens that nobody has that extension, that IP phone service subscribed. All they have is the one with the user and password, or user and PIN rather, already filled in. Log out of a phone, it logs her out after 10 hours, although we're not going to test that. That would be a rather lengthy video. If she logs into multiple phones, it automatically logs her out. When she logs out, it clears the records. Let's check that. Let's go ahead and say services. Log out, yes, we want to log her out. Okay, that's going to log out was successful. It's going to be resetting the phone. And we didn't test branch 2 SRST. We could have tested that. Again, it's the device. The device has the SRST reference via the device pool. That wasn't an option from the user device profile. It shouldn't be. It should follow whatever the device already has. We've already tested SRST. So, okay, now Hugo's been logged out. Let's check directories. Calls. Like that's been cleared. Once this refreshes, there we go, no records. What about missed calls? Calls has no records. So it cleared the phone, actually cleared the CCM database in reference to this phone name, SCPS. And while that, might not necessarily be good if you just have an occasional user visiting, obviously it's up to corporate policy. And if you're using or relying almost primarily or exclusively on extension mobility, such as a lot of companies do, Cisco does, for instance, then probably is a very good policy to enforce so that your all in your privacy is kept private. Okay. So are there any questions? We've pretty much covered extension mobility. The only thing we're going to cover when we come back is device and extension mobility interaction with THO. Right now, all of our calls, remember, even our call to international from the corporate headquarters site with user mobility, extension mobility logged in, or when we were calling international, or even what we thought was we were using device mobility, and we were dialing a national number, or actually even a subscriber number, 9 and then only 10 digits, but from the branch 2 site with our device carried over from the corporate headquarters site, it went out our local gateway because of local route group as an international number. So we'll look next at tail and hop off and how that can, again, just like it has in so many other times, really be extremely beneficial.